All right, so today we are going to have another episode of Property Talk where we just talk about property and property related matters. Each week or each month, we have a special guest. This week, we have a really special guest who will be talking about property strategies. My name is Anthony Lindsay, and I've been in finance for over 30 years. Now, a lot of people don't realize that the UK is one of the most complex areas or countries to make a property purchase. And they say that 47% of mortgage people with mortgages don't understand how mortgages work. And then you also have a problem where a lot of people that are first time buyers or would be first time buyers don't understand how mortgages work. So today we'll be talking through just the basics of mortgages. And then Muzzy, my special guest, will be talking about some property strategies. Muzzy, do you want to say hi to everybody?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So, as I said, buying a property in the UK can be quite complex. And what we want to make sure is that you have the tools that you need before you're ready to purchase. So, I have over 30 years of banking experience, both in the UK and in the US. And that banking experience includes debt management, wealth management, and lending and mortgages. Now, that's important because when you're taking out a mortgage, you can just go to someone that's just going to do the mortgage for you. But what you really want is someone that's going to advise you because purchasing a home is probably one of the biggest purchases that you'll make in life. So you want someone that's going to be able to give you the right type of guidance. Now, one of the questions that I get asked the most, or people just assume that they do know, is what is the difference between a broker and going directly to the bank? Now, in my 30 years in banking, I've worked in banks, I've managed branches, I've managed mortgage advisors. And there is actually quite a big difference between the two. Now, one of the differences is simply just service. So there's a service difference because when you go to your bank, so I was a manager at Halifax and Lloyd's, but when you walk into a Halifax branch for a mortgage, you are walking into Halifax for a mortgage. So the person that's there doesn't really have to establish themselves as a professional. You just assume because they're there, they are professional. And I'm not saying that they're not. It's just that they don't have to sell themselves to you. They don't have to sell their service. They just need to provide the service that you went in there for. The other thing that you have to consider is when you go directly to the bank for a mortgage, that bank, no matter which bank it is, they're only going to be able to talk about their products and their services, which means you don't get choice. And lastly, when you go into a branch to get your mortgage into a high street bank, you're probably not going to get the advice around protection and wills. And because so many people in the UK and globally, they know they need a will, but they tend to not have a will. When you're taking out a mortgage, that's the best time to review your estate situation, your will, etc. So I would advise anyone that is looking to get a mortgage, always talk to a mortgage broker because if you speak to a mortgage broker, they're going to be able to find the lender that is best for you. And it won't just be a situation of computer says no. Now, there's a lot of myths about mortgages, and there's a lot of language that people use, and they don't really understand the terminology, and or they're getting the information from people that aren't professional mortgage brokers who do it every day. So the analogy I make is I don't go to my plumber for gardening advice. So it's not even a matter of someone being intelligent, it's not a matter of someone being skilled, but if they're not a mortgage broker and doing the job every single day, they're not going to be as informed. So a lot of the myths are based on the perfect customer profile. So the perfect customer profile would be UK passport, someone who's employed PAYE for 12 months or more on a high salary with a good credit rating and a large deposit. So when people start talking about deposit amounts and people start talking about lending amounts, etc., usually they're basing it on this criteria. But keep in mind, if any of this criteria changes, so if you're a non-UK passport holder, you're self-employed or a contract worker, you're not on a high salary, you don't have a good credit rating, or you don't have a large deposit, it doesn't mean you won't be able to get a mortgage. It simply means that it might have different things that you're going to need to do or different hurdles that you need to get over, which a mortgage broker, in assessing your needs, will look at which things you may be a little bit short on, and they'll find a lender who will give you a mortgage. There's a few uncomfortable facts that people either know or don't know. And the first one is time kills deals. Now, what that means is the longer it takes for you to actually make the purchase as a buyer, the less likely it is that it will go through because that seller, depending on their circumstances, can start to get a little bit antsy. And in the UK, as far as the legal process of purchasing, the seller and the buyer can pull out pretty much at any time, all the way up until the end. So that means if you are looking to make a purchase and things are moving slow and that seller starts to get a little bit antsy, they know they have one deal in the bag. If other people approach them, they're going to tell that person, well, I have an offer of 450,000. If you can beat that, then maybe we can have a conversation. So that puts you at a disadvantage. Most mortgages are going to move as fast as the slowest person. So you could have a great estate agent, you could have a great solicitor, but if your broker is moving slow, that's as fast as the deal can move. So you want to make sure that you have someone that's reliable, someone that's responsive, someone that is professional. I often find that people get offended with this next one where it says buyers are liars. Now, let's be honest. If you're purchasing a property, and let's just say your budget is 400,000, you're not going to tell the seller that your budget is 400,000. You're going to tell them a lower amount. Now, estate agents know that the person's probably not telling them the top amount. So what that means is when you go to them and tell them, my budget's 380,000, they're probably going to show you houses at 400,000. And the other thing is there's a saying that people buy at the top of their budget. So when you tell the estate agent who's not your friend and doesn't work for you, when you tell them that your budget is 380 to 400, they don't even think about the 380. They think about the 400 and start showing you properties above that. Now, also the seller's not going to tell you the lowest amount that they're willing to accept. So in the whole process, you have the seller being a little bit dishonest, you have the buyer being a little bit dishonest, and you have the estate agent who works for the seller and whose job and contractual obligation is to get the very most that they can get for the sale of that property. As I said, 50% of all deals fall through. And when you talk to a broker or when you're talking about purchasing a property and someone asks you how much you have for a deposit, talk about pounds and not percentage. Quite often I'll ask people, how much do you have for a deposit? And they'll say, I have 10%. Now we can all do math. So we know if the property price is 280, 10% of 280 is 28,000. But if the property price is 300,000, then 10% is 30,000. And 2,000 is not going to fall out of the sky. So always let the broker know the pound amount that you have, that they can work the deal around the money that you have in your pocket and not just a percentage. We're going to go through the key stages of making a purchase. So the initial stage is the consultation and financial assessment. So that's when you're actually talking to the mortgage broker, you're giving him or her your information, they're doing the credit checks or getting your credit report, etc. Now, one of the best pieces of advice I can give anyone that's looking to purchase, start the process before you're ready to start the process. So by that I mean 6 months before you're ready to purchase, speak to a mortgage broker. This is really important because there's a lot of tips, hints, guidance, and information that a broker can give you that quite often take 3 to 4 months to actually show up or to make a difference. So there's little things like canceling unnecessary direct debits, checking your bank statement for standing orders that are for things that you no longer pay. If you have, like, let's just say you have a £10,000 deposit, but you have credit cards in with balances that amount to £1,000. In a lot of cases, the best thing you can do is pay off those credit cards and maybe have a little bit less for a deposit. But if you don't know these things, you'll go into the purchase process and start the mortgage process, and it will be too late for you to make a difference. So the first thing is initial consultation and financial assessment. Then you'll get what's called an agreement in principle. So an agreement in principle is both super important and it's also worthless. So it's super important because a lot of estate agents, and it makes sense, and sellers want to see that you can get the property before they'll actually take you seriously as far as making an offer. So it is important in that respect. But remember, an agreement in principle is not a mortgage offer, it's not a credit check in most cases, and it's not an application. It's simply the process of putting figures into a screen or on a computer, and it's saying, yeah, based on what you put in, we would lend you some money. However, it's not verified. So I could, in theory, go and get someone £1 million mortgage because I'm just putting figures in. So always make sure when you're working with a broker that they're going to do an agreement in principle that can convert into a mortgage offer. So make sure they do their due diligence before they just print something out for you. Once you have the agreement in principle, you know how much you can borrow, you can start your search and hopefully find a property that you love. Once you find the property that you love, you will negotiate. So if they're saying it's 300, you say, well, actually, I'm going to offer 280. You'll reach a point, the offer will be accepted. This is when you convert the agreement in principle into a mortgage application. At this point, this is when you're providing evidence of the things that you're saying or said on the agreement in principle. It can all be done in one step. So you can technically do an agreement in principle, get an accept, and then turn that into a full mortgage application. But they are actually two processes. At this point, the bank will order a valuation. Now, a couple of things can happen. The agreed price can be the price that the bank values the property at. The bank could come back and say the property is worth more, or the bank could come back and say that the property is worth less, in which case you're going to need to find that shortfall either by borrowing more from the bank or putting more of a deposit down. At that point, once you get the mortgage offer, what will happen is you'll start all of the conveyancing, then you move to exchange of contracts and to completion. um, right now most mortgages are taking about 6 months to complete. Things can go wrong, so make sure you're prepared. And keep in mind during that process, rates could go up or could go down. So make sure you have a mortgage broker who's going to continually search the market. And if that lender has a better rate, that they contact you and put you on the better rate. And before we move into Muzzy, I'm just going to give you guys a few tips on what you can do to get the best mortgage. One of the things to consider doing, as far as your savings that you're using for your deposit, put it all into one bank account. It will make it easier when you're dealing with the solicitors and demonstrating that you have the savings. Make sure that the funds aren't coming from out of the country, and if they are, they're trackable within about 2 years. If you're getting gifts from family, then you're going to need a gift letter. As I said, clean up your credit card, clear debts, manage your debts responsibly, and cancel any unnecessary direct debits. So, if you are looking to get a mortgage, that's a quick overview. But what you're going to need to do is reach out to myself or a mortgage broker that you know and trust, get an agreement in principle, start house hunting, and don't forget if I'm doing your mortgage or someone else is doing the mortgage for you, make sure that you refer business to them. It is a relationship business, and the best way that you can thank your mortgage broker, other than paying them, is to refer other people over to them.
A slight percentage of the question. The question is to make money for what? Okay. Money flows, money is currency. It's something that allows you to do something. But what is that something for you? Yeah. It's the best way that I've had it explained was by a chap called Simon Sinek, who said a business is like a car and money is like fuel. You buy a car and use fuel for that car to move, but you don't buy a car for the sake of making fuel.
Yeah.
You don't start a business for the sake of making money. Okay, money is what keeps the business running, but that business has its own purpose. What is that purpose? Why are you getting involved in this? So this is stuff that we weren't actually taught at the points that we started. And therefore, I think it's very important that we speak about the mindset up front. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And one of the things I have to say, like when we spoke at that real estate event when we first met,
Mm,
two of the things that stood out for me about you and your presentation was the conversation around mindsets. I was impressed by that. But also, you're one of the few people in the space that is like, look, it's not easy. You're not selling the get rich quick mentality. You're not selling people a dream. You're saying like this is a great thing that you can do. It's a great way of building wealth. But if you're coming into this thinking that this is easy, the way that you worded it was good because you're like, then I'd rather you not do it because
yeah.
it's not easy. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I know if I were to actually run courses, I wouldn't sell that many tickets, but it's it's the truth. It's because I see it happen so many times, and it's just so heartbreaking when someone then screams and complains about the fact that I've spent this many thousands of pounds on this course and it doesn't work. That doesn't work, and that doesn't work. And what they mean by that doesn't work is my expectations were put there, my reality is there.
Yeah,
Why am I not making 1 million in the first year like I was supposed to?
yeah,
Right. And it's just that's literally all it is. Because if if someone else has gone through those courses and picked up that information and they've become successful and someone else hasn't, then the issue is not with the course.
yes, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And to build on that, it's also about barriers to entry. So I'm
absolutely.
I'm old enough to remember when what we used to call pyramid schemes, which is now
Yeah.
multi-level marketing, when these things were coming into vogue. And one of the things that I would point out to anybody, in and of itself, I'm talking about the legit ones. I'm not talking about the ones that are just dodgy. But most of them, the product and the actual process is good. It's just people's expectations they figure, and they're sold in a way that you're going to come in, and in 3 months you're going to make X, and then in four
Yeah.
months, and then before you know it. And what happens is most people, and this is another thing that you said, most people don't know how to network. So because they don't know how to network, initially when they get started, they exhaust their entire contact list. And not
Yeah.
everyone's going to buy the product or service. And then what do? They have nowhere else to go. So with this
Mm,
and with everything else, it's great that you emphasize the fact that it is work. And with barrier to entry, you have to think this way. Anything that has a low barrier to entry is going to be saturated and therefore it's not going to be profitable.
absolutely.
So the
Absolutely.
work is the barrier to entry. So what would you say are the most common mistakes that you see people make?
So it's following from what you've just said there. One of the biggest mistakes, and I know some people are just going to completely go crazy about this. One of the biggest mistakes that I have seen being made, and I made the same one, is once you find new information that you think is absolutely brilliant and that will definitely work, you decide to take that information whilst you're in the process of believing that it actually works and you don't fully understand it, you bring it back into your old circle and try to convince everyone else. Okay. Now, logically, it kind of makes sense. I've just found new information. I think this is great. I'm going to go into my circle and convince everyone else to do it so we can all do it together. Logically, makes sense, right? But the certain people in your inner circle and your current circle who just are not there in terms of mindset, it's not to say there's anything wrong with them. they're just not there. And if you have a certain smaller level of belief of what's possible and you come and eradicate it in people that are still not there, what's going to happen to you is you're just going to lose that confidence as well. And you eventually just not going to do it. And we tend to talk about it as I think it's called the crab mentality.
Yeah.
If all crabs are actually stuck in a bucket and one of the crabs tried to get out, the other crabs will grab it back down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the same concept. If you find something that really works and you think it actually works and you're in a process of trying to really get it and push forward to it, stick with people that are already where you want to be. Let them drag you out. And the best way to convince everyone else is to see you get out of that bucket.
Mm. And that leads me on to something that I wanted to ask you. So, who would you say inspired you? So, who are the people that made you realize it's something that you could do and leave a really good job? Because I know you're an engineer, like
Yeah.
leave a really good job to pursue the property and property strategies.
That's a good question. Mine was actually a bit different. So I wouldn't say there's anyone specifically that I actually watched and I found really inspirational and followed them out of this bucket and ended up leaving my job. I think there's different reasons to why we make certain decisions, and there's a push and pull, right? There's a pull of something that's happening in the future that you really want to aspire to and follow, and there's something bad that's happening behind you that you're trying to run away from, right? The concept of pain and gain. In my scenario, there was that much pain in the current situation that I needed to get out. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
wasn't just considering thinking, I wonder what this is. Let me just dabble into it. It was just I was just in an environment where I felt that I've exhausted my every part of energy, level of intellect. I'm not progressing, and I never like feeling like I'm just stagnant.
Mhm.
And I got to a point where I thought something's going to need to change. And then all sorts of different things started to happen. This is the COVID kind of period as well. And we started being, what was that word, furloughed, and
Yeah.
potentially people were going to be losing their jobs. So I was at the brink of I'm either just going to lose my job completely and be unemployed for a period, probably struggle to find a job because we're in COVID. I then just jumped before I got pushed.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that is good to hear because people tend to come into these things for different reasons and in different ways. And it's good that you also talk about the why because that why and understanding your why and having the right why is what will keep you going in those times when things get quite difficult, which
yeah,
they always will. And this is where you were talking about, the decisions we make being 80% emotional and
yeah,
20% logical. And the example that I use with people is the car commercial. So the two most
mm,
expensive things that you're going to tend to purchase in life are your car and your home.
yeah,
So we accept that. So if your home is one of the most expensive things that you're going to purchase, and the car being the other one, if we made logical decisions and we purchased based on logic, what you would find is that when they were doing car commercials, they would simply just give all the information about the car. They'd say it gets this kind of fuel efficiency, it did. But they do the exact opposite in car commercials. They just sell emotion. So what
yeah,
they'll have is, a really good looking guy or a really good looking girl or people out in the mountains as a family having fun because they know you'll make the emotional decision, as you said, and you'll back it up with the facts. So at the end of the commercial, they'll just reel off a couple of things, but they know that they want to hook you with the emotion. Now, you talked about a few different strategies. So, how does someone decide what is the best strategy for them?
Oh, love that question. I love that question. So there's, as mentioned, there's many different strategies, and you can easily get to a point of what we class as analysis paralysis, which is which one do I do? Oh, that one sounds really good. That one sounds really, really good. That one sounds good. The simple way to decide which strategy you're going to need is this. One, you want to decide how you want to get paid. Okay. So in property, you get paid in three different ways. So you decide how you want to get paid. And then also in property, you need three different things to be able to get a deal. Okay. So the first three things, if you're in a position where you can write stuff down, I'll suggest you write this down. So the first way you get paid is cash flow. The second way you get paid is cash out. And the third way is equity. And I'll explain each of them. And then on the right hand side, you also want to think about the three things that are required for a property deal, right? One being time, and then the second one being skill or experience, and then the third one being money. Right. So cash flow, this is constant money coming in every month, every couple of weeks, every week, depending on how you set it up. So if you've got, let's say you've got a property and there's tenants in there, they're paying you rent every month. That's cash flow. Or if you have a house and you put it on Airbnb and getting paid every 2 weeks, every other week, that's cash flow. So constant money coming in is cash flow. And if you need to be paid in terms of cash flow, usually people will get paid in cash flow, people that are looking to replace their income or potentially leave their jobs so they can focus on property. If that's how you want to get paid, you choose the strategy that pay you in cash flow. Okay. Cash out is when you do a piece of work and you get paid once. For example, you buy a house, you renovate it, and then you sell it. So all of the work that you've done, you only get paid once, because once you've sold the property, it's gone. You make that chunk of profit and then that's it. So that's cash out. And then equity, this is the difference between the value of the house and the debt that's in the house. Okay. So you buy a house that's worth 100,000, you raised £10,000 deposit, and the bank gives you £90,000. So you owe £90,000 and 10,000 is your equity. And as you go along, you're paying down the mortgage and the value of the house is going up. So your equity is growing. Okay. So the money is just in the house, but you can't pull a brick to pay for bread. The money is just in
I
the
like
house,
that.
right?
I like that.
So you just need to decide how you want to get paid. Now, there's people that are happy being paid in equity because they're cash rich and they're asset poor. So they'll use the houses as their bank accounts essentially. They'll just buy houses and leave the money in there and just let the equity grow. So you want to decide which way you want to get paid. Now, once you've decided which way you want to get paid, you then come back to the right hand side and say, with the three things that are required, money, skill, and also time, which one of these do I have? Which one do I need? Okay. Now, once you've compared the two and you know which one you actually want to get paid in and which one you have and what you don't have, it then narrows down the amount of strategies that you can get yourself involved in. And then you can make a decision on which one you want to go for. I
That's
hope that makes
excellent.
sense.
That's good. So we have a couple of questions, and we have about 10 minutes left. So
Uh-huh.
we're gonna just jump in with these questions. So Chippo asked, how much capital do you need to start at HMOs?
Okay, so the couple there's a couple of factors that play a part in that. Okay, so if you're buying the HMO, then there's quite a lot of money you're going to require because you have to buy it. You have to raise a certain amount of deposit. Typically, you're raising 25% of the value, and the difference would be whereabouts in the country you are. So 25% of an HMO in London is different to 25% of an HMO in Middlesbrough. Okay,
Yeah,
so that's if you're buying the house. If you're renting the house to run in HMO, what you want to consider is the first month's rent, the deposits that you'll pay, and also the cost of setting it up, right? Those are the three things that you're going to be paying for upfront. Now, how much that would be is purely dependent on where you live, where that HMO is going to be. Okay, so in the West Midlands, London, in Middlesbrough, it all depends. So typically, the first month's rent and then the deposit. The deposit is usually about 5 weeks worth of the rent. Okay, about 5 weeks worth of the rent. And then the setup cost depends on the state of the house. Okay, when you're doing a rent to rent, I would not recommend you spend too much money on setup, i.e., I wouldn't expect you to start renovating the house. If it needs plumbing work, if it needs changing something in the house, you don't want to spend too much money. Ideally, you want to just purchase furniture, maybe paint and touch up. With some properties, if the deal is good enough, you can then change the carpets if you want to. Okay, but don't spend too much money. So what I tend to look at is an 8 month, 8 to 12 month rule. Okay, it used to be 6 months, but 6 months rules are getting difficult now. What I mean by that is if you've managed to calculate that this property will make me £500 a month, and then you have a 6 month rule, for example, which means your total amount is £3,000 upfront. That's how long it should take for your money to come back. If it's the 8 month rule, you can add on a grand on top of that. And then whatever it is that you want to actually get to. So if it's 12 months rule and you're making £500 a month, that means the total amount of money you want to spend upfront will be £6,000.
Hmm.
Okay. You can use that with whatever numbers that you want to, and then figure out how much you want to spend upfront. So if 6,000 is enough for the rent, deposit, and also the setup cost, then you're looking at a good deal.
So we have about 5 minutes. Um, I like how you've broken those things down. And in the next 5 minutes, I'm gonna ask you this next question because I think it's a good way of closing. It's a good way of telling people how they can contact you and get more information. So the question is, from your experience, would you recommend those starting their property journey to have a mentor, or can they just rely on YouTube and books, or asking questions of those who have been on the property journey for a while? What's the
Mhm.
best thing to do for beginners?
So for beginners, you always want a mentor. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean a mentor is someone that you go and pay for. Okay. We all have mentors, and not many people want to admit this. Every single person right now has a mentor. There's someone that you're looking at and you follow them. If it's one or it's 10 people in your inner circles, you're actually doing whatever it is that they suggest. You want to be smart about the mentor that you work with. Now, if you are in a position where you can pay for a mentor, as long as you have realized that this person um, marries up with you, your way of learning, and you actually have the same values and you want to follow them, by all means pay for it if it's something that's going to shorten your journey. But you can actually get mentors where you can offer your time, i.e., you can work in their business, and then you can gain knowledge and get information from them in return. There's a lot of people that allow people to do that. To running their businesses, they just let you join the business. You do the work, you don't get paid for that, but equally you see how the business runs. So the answer is yes, I would recommend you work with a mentor at the start.
Excellent. And just to address that whole thing about YouTube and TikTok, what I tell people is that YouTube and TikTok are really good places to understand and learn about concepts. But if you're looking to actually get up and running and do things the right way, what you're going to want to do is make sure that you have people that are accountable, because what I found with a lot of people that do the social media route and give out information on social media, a lot of them aren't qualified. They don't have a qualification in an area, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. But it then means if they tell you what you actually need to do is go out and buy properties through a limited company, for some people that's the right advice. For others, it's not. So always seek out professional. If you find or you hear something on social media, it's something that you can then go to a professional and say, well, I've heard about this strategy based on my circumstances. So let them know what you're trying to accomplish. Let them know what your appetite for risk is. Let them know where you're trying to go, and then they can advise you. But if you just look at thumbnails, because this is the other thing, people are optimizing the images on their social media to draw you in. So they're going to say something provocative to draw you in. I saw one recently where it's like, for example, buying houses is for suckers. Everybody should rent. Now, when you see that, it makes you want to click on that. It makes you want to see what is being said. So
Yeah.
I think what you've said is great. It's good to have a mentor because then there's that personal relationship. I also agree with you. Most of us have a mentor, whether or not we care to admit it. And I
Yeah.
also like the fact that, the way that you do things, you give away the way that I would say you give away a lot of information. So even this stream tonight, you've talked everybody through the strategy,
Yep.
so people can take that and run with it. But it's probably better to have someone like yourself who can partner with you and actually answer the questions and help you avoid the pitfalls, as someone asked in here. So let me just we'll close on this over the next couple of minutes. How would people get in contact with you if they want a mentor? So Marius asked, "Are you available as a mentor?"
Well, the answer is yes. I am available as a mentor. That's something that I do on a daily basis. So the best way to contact me is on social media. So I'm on all platforms. If you type in my name Muzinduna, that's Muzzie, and the surname is Nduna. So whichever platform you're comfortable with, feel free to reach out. Just drop me a message and say assistance with mentoring. I'm happy to help out. We can arrange a consultation call, speak about how you can help. So I love how you've actually put it there as well, Anthony, in terms of the content that you get from social media versus the help you get with a mentor. The difference there is one is content, the other one gives you context. And
Wow, I
that's
love
the
that.
big difference between that. Yeah.
I do love that. And those are the things. So, all right, what we do every month, we have these conversations. So we do talk through, the practical bits about a mortgage, but then we also have a special guest that can talk through the specifics. The idea is that you can have access to information, that you can make informed choices. And there's a level of accountability because we're putting this out there to the world. It can be scrutinized, it can be sanity checked. And if you look at Muzzy, or if you look at me online, we're there. Like, our contact information is there. We're real people. We're not just people that are posting random things to be provocative, to entertain, to get clicks, to generate money like that. We actually are very passionate about adding value, about educating people, and giving people the tools that they need to be able to build wealth, whether it be through rent to rent or HMOs. We want to give people the tools. So my name is Anthony Lindsay, and I have been in banking and finance for over 30 years, so I know a thing or two. You can contact me on LinkedIn. You can contact me by calling. My number is on the screen, or you can email me. As I said, if you're looking to get a mortgage, make sure that you find a mortgage broker that you trust. Make sure that there's someone that's going to have your best interest in mind, and also make sure that you're open and honest with them, because without the information, they're not going to be able to find you the best deal. So my information is here. You can search for Muzzy, and if you contact me because you're unable to find Muzzy online, which would be almost impossible, I will get you in contact with him. We appreciate everybody joining us tonight, and we have one every single month. We have different topics each month, but we have these type of conversations every month. So if you have friends or family that's looking to find out more about property investing, find out more about mortgages, find out how to build wealth, as Muzzy said, it's not easy. It's not a, get rich quick scheme. But if you put the work in, and if you educate yourself, and if you're consistent and persistent, you can make it happen. So my information is here. Muzzy, I'm going to hand over to you to say goodbye to everybody, and again remind them how they can get in contact with you.
Yes, absolutely. So for anyone who wants to get in touch with me, it's Muzzie, and the surname is Nduna on any social platforms. Feel free to drop me a message. Thank you very much for those that are watching, and hopefully this has been helpful. Massive thank you to yourself, Anthony. I really appreciate the invitation and look forward to doing more of these in the future.
All right, thank you, and thank you, and thank you to everybody that joined us this evening and is watching on future broadcasts. Have a good evening.
Awesome, guys. That was